here we are with the acclaimed assassination attempt on Trump. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Iranians are trying, but Iran is a boogeyman in American politics. So for Trump to big up that claim is a way of sustaining his image as a strong man. The Iranians hate me, Israel must love me, etc.
Look, talk to us about these President Trump claims that Iran has made moves on his life. He says they didn't work out, but they will try again. I think it's fair to say you don't buy it, do you?
Well, it's quite possible. I think the US intelligence community, the Biden administration, and the Secret Service all have a great interest in being very transparent, because clearly they've been less than competent in the two attempts that we know about in public. So they've got every interest in not having that happen again, and that Trump being fully briefed. The Iranian regime, since in one of his last acts in office, 3 days before the infamous assault on the Capitol, Trump had the leading Iranian general Soleimani killed, ostensibly in retaliation for actions against US bases in Iraq. And since then, the Iranians have pretty much put a death warrant on Trump's head. Well, they said he should face trial, and pending that, and without that happening, he deserves to be attacked. And by the way, as academic brackets here, once you start into going after other nations' leaders, it's an escalatory ladder. If you do something like that, don't be surprised if your adversary puts you on a kill list as well. And that's one of the reasons why we have people occasionally ring me up and ask me about why do all the diplomats get away with not paying their parking fines. Well, they had to have diplomatic immunity because in the olden days, if people got things wrong, your ambassador would be sent back to you with his head in a box or on a pike. And to establish civilized standards, you had diplomatic immunity to prevent this sort of escalation happening. Anyway, here we are with the acclaimed assassination attempt on Trump. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Iranians are trying, but Iran is a boogeyman in American politics. So for Trump to big up that claim is a way of sustaining his image as a strong man. The Iranians hate me, Israel must love me, etc.
So are you reading this then as Trump saying that Iran has recruited two alleged would-be assassins, that they essentially working for Iran, I don't know, as sort of spies? Is that kind of how you read what he's saying? And is that
I think
potentially the route that Iran would go through?
What Trump is saying and how far it corresponds to reality, it's impossible to judge. He has an interesting relationship to truth and reality, as we all know. And one has to say, is it good practice to make a public song and dance about it? Or is it better practice to, if you're looking at, you've seen all the movies, is it better practice to keep quiet and hunt down the miscreants using the full resources of the United States government? One might tend to think that it's better to keep quiet and hunt them down and tip the former President Trump off on the quiet. But Trump is not someone who sits on information. And they may have had to make a calculation. Well, we'll tell him because we can't possibly have it all go wrong and him not know. But then we have to expect that he will sound off about it because that's what he does.
Suppose there is truth behind it. Is that the route that Iran might potentially go? Would it be possible for them to sort of be on the ground, recruit American citizens, as it seems? Would that be the way that they would try and do it?
Possible. The key word you're using is possible. Yes, it's possible. If you're looking at it, yes, beyond the revenge issue, if you're looking at it from Tehran's point of view, would you rather have Harris or Trump? Well, Harris will be highly professional, support Israel. Trump could do anything, but he has something of a record of not wanting to be engaged in external wars. That's part of his shtick. And at one point, I think he stopped his national security advisor, John Bolton, when Bolton had got warplanes in the air heading to Iran. during his presidency. At least that's the goss on that issue. So to some extent, you might think that Iran might rather have an unpredictable, isolationist American president than one like Harris, who's going to continue the traditional Biden and other presidents' policy of being very, very close militarily to the state of Israel.
Does that mean you think that they would sort of prefer a Harris presidency to a Trump presidency in Iran?
No, I think the other way around. I think so all speculation is valid, and I'm here to speculate. But there's an argument, put it no more than that they would prefer to have Trump than Harris, because Trump was unpredictable and an isolationist, and as he proudly says, got out of Afghanistan, handed Afghanistan back to the Taliban, left Biden to carry the can for it, of course, and has a record of not wanting to be involved in foreign wars. So that's part of his platform. So from that perspective, one can see that the Iranians might actually prefer to have Trump.
It seems to me then that it would be an odd decision, if there is any truth in this, to be trying to assassinate the preferred candidate in a two-horse race before the outcome of the election.
Yes, but we're imposing my rationality on the situation, and that may well not be the case. It may also be that the motivation is simply to sow chaos into the American political system, and that meltdown also produces a level of instability. But clearly, for Harris, she doesn't want Biden to do anything dramatic in the next 2 months. One perhaps sees that in relation to what's going on in the Middle East, that all parties, have got 2 months to get on with it before Uncle Sam comes back in and starts telling people what to do. If there is an inclination to do that, they have more of a free hand now than perhaps they will do in the early new year, whether it's Netanyahu or Iran.
Can I ask you a little bit about what we've seen over the course of the last week in the Middle East, with obviously Israel's attacks on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon? It seems like Iran has gone very quiet, or stayed very quiet. I'm just wondering where they are.
Well, indeed, but I think that they may well also be calculating they don't want to incite further escalation from Israel. But the Iranians have had to have an awful shock when, in the aftermath of the horrible Hamas attacks of October the 7th, there was a point when Iran launched a mass missile attack on Israel, and almost all of those weapons were intercepted and shot down. And I think that must have been a real setback for the Iranians in realizing that their vaunted capabilities weren't really up to much, and the political leaders will have been dismayed with the failure of their military to do what their military told them they could do.
Do you think then that Hezbollah, being Iranian backed, are being left a little bit high and dry by I don't know whether you'd call them the leaders, but certainly those that support them?
Well, I think Israel's adversaries tend to be a lot, not to say they are not motivated by extremely mal intentions against Israel. They certainly are. But I think technologically and militarily, they are somewhat weaker. The problem, of course, is that from the Israeli perspective, for every adversary they kill, every bit of technology that they destroy, you just come back with further threat. And that goes back to the origins of Hezbollah in the Israeli attacks on the camps in Lebanon in the 1980s. They directly produced Hezbollah. And I think the problem for the Israelis is the fallacy of the last move. They think they can whack the enemy, and then the enemy comes back in a different form and stronger. And overall, the state of Israel and other parties in the region have a real objective interest, a realistic interest in pursuing stability and peace, because for all of their populations and indeed for their governments, further escalation is a one-way route to disaster for everybody.
And of course, all of this will be being carefully watched by the White House, won't it? It's interesting going back to what you were saying about how Kamala Harris probably wouldn't want Joe Biden to do anything, too dramatic, say before the election, at least, maybe even before the end of his presidency. What do you think
Well, I'd say not
Iran's
necessarily.
thinking
I
is
think it's
around
a
that?
question of the political calculation that it doesn't want to. If there is a military move that would produce a 10% swing to Kamala Harris, then her advisors may be more impressed. But I think independent and middle America are going to be highly skeptical of military activities, further escalation, and perhaps lay it at her and President Biden's door. So I think but there's a thin line here because, of course, further provocations can come to get to a point where the White House feels it's essential to act. For example, if there's a large terrorist act in the United States, God forbid, then that would require fairly instant reaction, one would assume.